Why? The Tower of London used to be one of the scariest places in the entire world. The Tower of London has had many uses over its 900 years of existence. It's been a palace, a prison, an armory, and even a zoo. But it's probably most famous for being one of the worst places to be in if you were on the wrong side of the king at the time. Its reputation for being one of the scariest buildings in London is well deserved. Here are just some of the reasons why. Before we begin, now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Number 10, it was a prison first and foremost. Although it has done many things over its long life, the main purpose of the tower has always been to be a prison. Ever since William the Conqueror came to power in 1066, he wanted somewhere that was central to hold his prisoners. He built the first wooden tower in 1078, and by 1100 it was made of stone. Over the next few centuries, the towers would grow and change, but they were all used for holding prisoners. Even when it wasn't the main purpose of the structure, like when it was being used as a palace, anyone who displeased the monarch could find themselves thrown in the nearest cell. This included Henry VIII's wives, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, both of whom ended up losing their heads after staying in the tower. Number 9, the execution block. If you were sent to the tower, there was a very good chance you wouldn't make it out alive. And if you did survive your stay there, there was still a very real chance that you would be killed before you left. At different points in history, the execution block was set up outside the tower walls, the most famous of which is now in the courtyard within the grounds. Throughout the years, people from all walks of life have met their end here. Queen Isabella of France, the first wife of Edward II, was beheaded in 1305 after she fell out of favor with the king. She was only the beginning, though, as throughout the rest of the century, anyone unlucky enough to be caught up in the Wars of the Roses found themselves executed. By order of King Henry Tudor, after winning the Battle of Bosworth Field and ending the Wars of the Roses in 1485. His first order was to have the 8 remaining Yorkist prisoners taken to the Tower of London, where they were executed, including the young Edward, Prince of Wales, who was only 12 years old. The last person to be executed in the Tower was the spy and double agent John Austen in 1842. Number 8, the Bloody Tower. There are several towers within the larger complex, each with their own dark secrets. One of the darkest places in the entire tower is the Bloody Tower, named so because of the bloodstains that can apparently still be seen in the stonework. Originally named the White Tower, this is actually the oldest part of the building. It was constructed in 1066 and took 8 years to complete. Once finished, it was the tallest building in London and could be seen from miles away. Back then, it was a symbol of the new regime under William the Conqueror and served as both a fortress and a royal palace. As impressive as it may seem today, it was a much grander sight back then. Now, although it is no longer used as a prison, it is still used as a military garrison. So parts of it are off limits to the public. However, it is open to explore and offers some of the best views in the city, assuming you can brave the ghosts that supposedly still reside there. In 1135, during the civil war between Stephen and Empress Matilda, supporters of Stephen murdered the 2 young princes, presumably nephews of Stephen, in cold blood. Their bodies were tossed into a nearby well, and their deaths were blamed on Matilda. Since then, the tower has been known as the Bloody Tower, with some people claiming to hear the boys playing near the well where they died. Number 7, Triple Deceiver. You would think that after living through the plague and seeing what it can do to the population, the citizens of London would have learned their lesson about where not to live. Apparently not, because in 1665 the plague returned and once again began to ravage the city. Londoners panicked and the government tried to pass a law forcing citizens to leave the city in order to prevent the spread of the disease. Of course, they didn't listen and stayed in the capital. Instead, they fled to the countryside around the city, which eventually became known as the plague villages. These were settlements that sprung up near London, where people hoped to ride out the plague until it passed. Unfortunately, these villages were unsanitary and overcrowded, and instead of escaping the plague, they simply spread it to the countryside. No one knows exactly how many died during the Great Plague, but it's estimated to have been anywhere between 100,000 and 200,000 people, or about 1 out of every 5 Londoners. Historians also believe that the plague returned a second time after the Great Fire of London in 1666. The fire broke out in Pudding Street and quickly spread, destroying over 13,000 houses, killing livestock and ruining the source of food for the people of London. Londoners were already weakened by the plague, and with food running short, they began to turn on each other. Some were driven mad with hunger and others resorted to stealing and killing in order to eat. All this combined with the fact that people thought the fire was God's punishment for the plague meant that the people of London were more susceptible to another plague when it hit. Number 6. The Salt Tower. The Salt Tower got its name because of the salt that was stored inside it, before it was used as a prison. Built in 1561, it stands 80 feet tall and was originally used as a garrison. It wasn't until 1667 that it was converted into a prison. One of the prisoners held in the Salt Tower was Sir Thomas More, a lawyer and statesman who served as Lord Chancellor of England from 1529 to 1532 until he resigned. After falling out of favour with Henry VIII, due to his opposition to Henry's plans to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, he was arrested and charged with treason and heresy and imprisoned in the Tower in 1534. He was executed 2 years later. His daughter, Margaret Roper, and her husband, Sir Thomas Bridges, were also imprisoned there following the failed 1539 subsidy levy. They were released in 1544 after serving 5 years in captivity. The Salt Tower was finally decommissioned in 1825 when it was decided that it was too expensive to maintain. Today it is open to the public and visitors can climb the tower for a bird's-eye view of the grounds. Number 5. The Bell Tower. The Bell Tower is one of the largest structures in the entire complex and can be seen from miles away. Its purpose was twofold. First, it served as a warning system, letting the citizens of London know when to take cover in case of attack. Secondly, it also let the people of London know the time of day. Originally, there were 3 bells in the tower, but they were taken down in 1648 and melted down by Oliver Cromwell. One of the bells was recast in 1662 and named the Monster. It weighs almost 2 tons and is still there today. The second bell was never recast and remains in the tower. Known as the Old Faith, it's one of the oldest pieces of the original structure and serves as a reminder of the turbulent past of the building itself. After the bell was recast, it rang for the first time on July 1662, marking the restoration of the monarchy. However, it was rung so enthusiastically that the rope holding the bell snapped, sending it crashing to the ground. A new bell was cast in 1664, but it was damaged in 1703 during a fire. It was recast in 1710 and named Peace. When the fire broke out, it cracked and had to be taken down. A replacement was cast in 1711 and named Glory. After 1782, the bell became known as the General, and it's this bell that still rings out across the grounds. Visitors can also climb the tower to get a closer look. Number 4. The Lion Tower. The Lion Tower was built in 1224 to protect the entrance to the gatehouse. Named for the lions that once guarded the door, it was the first structure to be built outside the original White Tower. For most of its existence, the tower served as a prison, and one of the most infamous inmates was Lady Jane Grey. She was a member of the royal family and was named heir to the throne in 1553 after Mary I came to power. But when Mary discovered what her father, King Henry VIII, had done, she was thrown into the tower along with her father and brother. In 1554, they were charged with high treason and Lady Jane Grey's father was executed. While she was languishing in the tower, she was visited by William Grey de Wilton, 1st Baron Ferrers of Chartley, who became her lover while she was in prison. After 9 months, she was released and married Guildford, giving birth to 3 children. She lived a quiet life until Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603 and her cousin James I came to power. He needed someone to blame for the unrest that had occurred during Elizabeth's reign and chose Lady Jane Grey, taking her and her husband back to the tower and executing them. Number 3. Escape from the tower. If you manage to survive your stay in the tower, that's not necessarily a good thing. Many prisoners, no matter what crime they were accused of, were given the option to escape. Granted, it was usually under the condition that if they were caught, they would be put to death. One of the most daring escapes was carried out by Sir Thomas Overbury in 1613. He had fallen out of favor with King James I and was sentenced to death by starvation. His friends knew they couldn't just break him out, so instead devised a way for him to fake his own death. On the night of November 18, 1613, Overbury pretended to have a seizure, and they wrote a note saying that he was dead and had gone insane. The guards took the body away and buried it in the nearby church of St. Margaret. Meanwhile, Overbury escaped to France. He lived out the remainder of his days in exile and wrote pamphlets critical of James I until his death in 1615. Another escape involved two men who faked their own executions. Colonel Thomas Blood and Captain Thomas Mills were both accused of treason and sentenced to death. On the morning of July 16, 1670, they told the guards that they had been visited by priests and had become born-again Christians. They asked for forgiveness and claimed that they didn't want to go to hell. The guards agreed to let them go if they would allow them to cut off their heads. Blood and Mills agreed and were beheaded, or rather, they pretended to be. Afterwards, they met up with some accomplices and attempted to flee the country. They were eventually caught, though, and Blood was sent back to the Tower where he spent the rest of his life. The cages. The cages in the White Tower date back to 1565, when the tower was being renovated, and the governor at the time decided that the lodgings were not up to par. While it was being refurbished, he ordered the rooms to be enclosed with iron bars. They were there to keep the residents from leaving and to keep others from entering without permission. These cages were used for nearly 200 years, with the last person to be held in one of them being Queen Marie Antoinette's lover, the Swedish Count Axel von Fersen. He was a member of the French nobility, who had an affair with the French Queen before the French Revolution. After the Revolution began, he helped Marie Antoinette and her children escape from Paris to Normandy. Once there, he left them and headed to London, where he was arrested and thrown in the Tower. He was later released and went on to fight in the American Revolutionary War before returning to Europe. Number 1. Lady in the Lake. According to legend, there is a lady in the lake within the Tower grounds. In the middle of the 18th century, there was a large lake on the grounds of the Tower, where they kept the swans that were bred for the royal table. This lake was filled with water from the River Thames, but in 1735 it dried up. Nobody knows exactly what happened. Perhaps the river changed course, or perhaps something else caused the lake to run dry. What is known is that when the lake dried up, the swans died and the moat became a stagnant pool of water. People started to say that the bad smell coming from the rotting birds attracted the ghost of a woman. She was said to be dressed in 18th century clothing and was seen walking around the lake before disappearing. Even to this day, there is a bad smell from time to time, especially in the summer. Is there really a lady in the lake, or is it just a story? You'll have to decide for yourself. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Do you know any more fun facts about the Tower of London? Share them with us in the comments below. And don't forget to come back soon for more videos like this.